Hello, hello.
What up, dude?
Nothing much, my brother. Nothing much. How you doing, man?
Pretty good.
Okay. Aloha, gang. Welcome on this Wednesday night. Wednesday, the 27th of January. It's about 6:49. We'd like to say aloha to all of you. Thank you for joining us tonight. I'm Uncle Charlie. That's Brother Mel. And we have a good show in store because many have asked about, again, tourism. You know, there's pros and cons to everything. And again, we just want to bring the information on so you can make an educated guess for yourself. We're not pushing anybody into a particular direction unless it's going to cause irreparable harm to each and every one of us because of this pandemic. So when you get the chance, please at this time, if you're on with us and you can hit the share button, please do so right there. Please do so. Hit the share button so we can share the heck out of this segment. We would love, and you know, we love you all. So we want you to have a good time in listening to our speaker tonight. First of all, we're gonna do a disclosure right now. There you go. Hey,
Bro, I stepped
right,
it
right,
up, man. I
right,
stepped it up.
God.
Six
Wow.
dollars, $6.99 from Long's Drugs.
Right on.
And you can see my lights over there.
Yeah,
Studio lights. Get
right
that
on.
right? Yeah.
Good. So tonight, we're gonna hope and pray that we're gonna try to seek the answers. Many of you have asked, and so we're gonna do that. First of all, before I go into that, I'd like to touch and say thank you very much for attending or watching the show last night. I got word from Alexis. Many of you have written to her email address because some of you tried to go on the website to get the Mel and Charlie discounted special, but it wasn't working. It was going back into default, okay, charging you the regular price. He said not to worry about it. They're going to fix that problem. But we gave you that email address, which is maskupkauai, maskupkauai at gmail.com. So write to her at maskupkauai at gmail.com, and then she will get you your mask at the discounted rate. And just mention in your email that you saw Mel and Charlie. She wants to thank you. She's been inundated with inquiries. So we just want to thank all of you for coming on the show last night and putting that out there. So as I was saying earlier, tonight's guest, it was very hard to get him to, not get him to come on, but his scheduling was so busy. And so we would appreciate if the comments be directed in a pleasant way. I know there's pros and cons to everything else, but we can be civil about it. We don't have to go and really tune it up or bash anybody in the head because that's not what this is for. Okay, we want it to be educational, and hopefully we can. There's something that's going to appease everyone. I know we cannot make everybody happy, but we're going to try our best to get as much questions and answered tonight. But if there's someone that's just going off the rails and doing what they want to do because they're trying to make a statement, then guess what? We are not going to say anything. We are not going to say anything at all. You will just find yourself not being able to come on because I've shared with Mel that, instead of giving you a warning, because it seems warnings don't work, we are just going to go and bye-bye land. That's it. And then you'll be by yourself. You'll be in a sandbox by yourself, playing in the sand with maybe a little bit cat poop on the side. But that's up to you. You make that choice. And all we're saying is we want everybody to be pleasant and have a nice time tonight, because I sure am gonna try to get some questions answered, hopefully. And so with the sharing, your comments, please allow the comments to stream through, and we'll try to get them to our guests tonight. Okay, Brother Mel?
Thank you, sir. Appreciate appreciate the word of caution. We try to provide a safe environment for people. And Charlie and I had this discussion a few nights ago that we've actually lost some viewers because of the comments. And you know, those of you out there, if you each and every one of you can block anyone. You just press and hold their little picture, and you can block them, and you'll never see or hear from them again.
Yeah.
I encourage you guys to do that. But listen, we got Mr. John DeFries, very busy guy, and he's offered to come on to share HTA's perspective, and that's what he's here for. He's not here to be beaten up. We definitely aren't going to beat him up. If anyone thinks, and I'm gonna be straight, some of you guys, and if you guys disagree and you guys upset, that's fine. I respect everybody's opinion. But if you think that Hawaii will survive without tourism, you're dreaming. The question is how much tourism is sustainable, and I think that is what I want to hear from Mr. DeFries. Is, in my opinion, and I speak for Kauai, we have passed the capacity of tourism on Kauai, no doubt about it. We have an opportunity now to restructure our island, and every island has the same opportunities to recreate tourism in a way that we can sustain tourism and not compromise the quality of life for our residents. That's the ideal balance. And that is what we are trying to accomplish. And we've seen it with Chippewa folks, and other places throughout this world that have actually coexisted with tourism. But to think that we're going to be self-sustaining without tourism is really a dream. Oh my gosh, it's really a dream. And we need to have tourism at some level. Now, Mr. DeFries, I mean, would you take that job, Charlie? Would you take that job as the Hda director at this?
Well, I think, number one, you need to understand the job, because there's so many things that encompasses the tourism industry. It's not only tourism, they work in line with many of the businesses. Doesn't have to be a business like a hotel. You got stadiums involved, because bringing over games, and you're basically, I mean, I hate to say this, but, and maybe I'm wrong, but I think you're sort of like DBID. You're always looking for an economic opportunity. But I think with this pandemic, it throws a little wrench into the whole mix of things, because now we got to try to do things in a safe way. And so, one of the things I'm going to ask him, because I know for years tourism has always operated at this level, take it or leave it level. Well, the pandemic hit, and what? It's not business as usual. We got to think differently now. And I think that's the thing that we're struggling with right now. Can they think differently to make it safer, but allow guests to come and visit the islands? There's got to be a safe means. You just cannot open the floodgates and expect everything will be hunky dory. No.
Yeah.
It's not business as usual. It's going to be a little different. Yeah.
Yeah. So again, a delicate balance, and HTA's job is to promote Hawaii, and I think with the community input, I think a lot of us feel that we don't get any opportunities for input. I know we don't, and I was on a council for many years. We never was informed of when an airline was bringing a new direct flight to Kauai. We didn't have a choice. We didn't have any say at all. Neither did the mayor. They work their deals out with the state and with the feds, and they create a new route that comes direct to Kauai. No, I think the community should have a say in that. Why are we bringing more people in? Why are we bringing more people in when we're already past capacity? And I think that's where now we have an opportunity, because we are starting over. So now we can set the capacities, we can set the limits, we can restrict, we should anyway, be restricting the amount of arrivals coming into Hawaii. There's been a question real quick, and we still got a couple minutes before he'll be in. Mr. DeFries is the boss, or the CEO of Hawaii Tourism Authority. That's the agency, the government agency that promotes Hawaii. The HLTA and MUFI, they represent the lodging and tourism industry. That's two separate animals. Okay, we need to understand. HTA is a government-run, funded, and we're going to talk about his funding, which they're threatening to cut, but they are the agency that promotes Hawaii. HLTA is a private agency. It's not a state agency, and it is there to represent the lodging and tourism organizations, which are hotels, restaurants, all of those organizations or businesses that cater to the visitors, and that's a separate agency. Okay.
Yep.
So with that, and I'm gonna, Charlie, if you don't mind, I'll give you the honors, or the opportunity, or the honor to introduce our guest.
Well, ladies and gentlemen, welcoming to our platform tonight is none other than the CEO of HTA, and it's a pleasure for me to introduce him. Is none other than Mr. John DeFries. How are you doing, brother? Aloha.
Oh, wonderful, wonderful. Good to be on your island tonight.
Thank you. That's Brother Mel Raposo right there. You may have known as that former council member, council chair. And,
absolutely.
My friend.
Before we go back, I wrote to John and I said, before he and I was the only two guys in this really good, we have Leong's Hawaiian food over on Oahu. And we had this one place at Liliha Square called Nokaoi, Hawaiian food. And he and I would be the only ones sitting in there. And so I said, brother, I don't think you remember me. We was eating our food and just looking at each other because we were the only two guys there.
I actually did. And I told him butterfish and stew gravy was my favorite. So, I missed that restaurant.
Yeah. So, well,
Mr. DeFries, we want to thank you so much for spending tonight with us. Thank you, Ohana, for allowing you to share this hour, which will go by very quickly. So we don't want to take away any time, but I did want to personally say thank you. And I got to say that you took over HTA at a very tumultuous time. But I think I speak for a lot of people that we were so thankful that you were selected, Native Hawaiian, that was rooted in our culture and is akamai about Hawaii. So I just want to say that before we start, that we really appreciate you agreeing to take that challenge. Well, I asked Charlie, I said, Charlie, would you take that job? We both agreed.
Actually, half my friends think I've lost my mind, but that's okay. Hey, is the lighting okay?
Yeah, lighting's perfect.
It's fine.
Okay.
It's fine.
Yeah, it's perfect.
Well, we don't think you lost your mind. If not for leaders like you, where would we be?
Well, and a lot of my mentors actually are from Kauai too, and in my career in tourism. So I have plenty of aloha for your island as well.
Well, one thing that I would like to say, I can remember as far back, someone had mentioned, and he was in a tour industry, and I said, I remember John DeFries, and I just said I was still in high school, but I was working with Francis Kirk at the Outrigger on stage showroom. And I remember he used to bring in large groups when he had Teddy and Nancy, Barry Kim, all the shows up there.
SOS. Franny Kirk was, speaking of mentors, nobody knew the entertainment arena better than her.
Yeah. So that's when I remember you that far back, because once in a while I'd go to the main showroom, then I'll go to the Outrigger East when she opened up the second showroom with Roberto when he was on his own, when he went on his own. So
you had all the Lee brothers, right? You had Cal Lee, Ron Lee, all of them at the door, right?
Yes.
Yeah, that's the good old days. Yeah.
So, Mr.
I don't know how we survived it.
Why don't you start by sharing with us a little bit about yourself, your background, and
sure.
Who is John DeFries?
John DeFries, oldest of four boys and one girl, right? Parents who have since passed. Very loving family, John and Eleanor DeFries. I was born and raised in Waikiki, 2 blocks from the beach, half block from the zoo. And our family had a home there. So I was kind of like born into that kind of environment. And I will tell you, looking back, it was a wonderful place to grow up as a kid. I went to Jefferson Elementary, which is still there across from the zoo. And then our family moved to East Oahu, out in the first increments of Hawaii Kai, which was attracting a lot of young local families, police department, fire department, Hawaiian Telephone, all those families were kind of migrating. And so, you know, we grew up out there, and then I had my heart set on going to Kamehameha schools because my mother was an alumnus. I got turned down and I ended up at Punahou, which wasn't a bad place to end up, actually. And I'm grateful for that opportunity. Went to the University of Hawaii for 3 semesters. When I left, I had more parking tickets than credits. And then I went into the construction trades. And part of that was to come over and build the swimming pool at Coco Palms Hotel. In 1973, when Grace Guslander insisted that an all Hawaiian construction crew be assigned. And I headed that crew at a young age because I'd worked for my neighbor's company. And we did the 2 pools that were Mauka of what was then the Ali'i Kai Towers, the Kapa'a side of the lobby. And then it was there that I first saw these tour directors bringing tour groups to the hotel every day, every week. And they had all these slick white pants, white shoes, colorful shirt. And I looked at myself and I was covered in concrete and mud. And so at some point I said, you know, it's time to go take a look at what the tourism industry could offer me. And so I went to work eventually for the company that the Guslanders started, Island Holidays Hotels, Island Holidays Tours. A lot of great memories, Coco Palms, Kauai Beach Boy, the old Waiohai and Poipu Beach. And and then did that for 10 years, eventually got into resort development, the embassy vacation rental out at, near the Poipu Hyatt is one of the projects we did on Kauai Island. And so I eventually got into real estate development, ran my own company. And then in September, you know, I took the job at HTA. So that's a quick trip around a 40-year career.
Well, just to let you know, John, we've got, our show has garnered, you know, it started off on Kauai. A lot of our viewers, and when you get a chance to go on Facebook and look at, you know, a lot of the comments, a lot of good comments coming in, a lot of people remember you. We have people from every island on tonight. So not only Kauai, but we have Maui, Oahu, and the Big Island, Hawaii, that's watching as well. And we also have people as far out as in Texas that's on the show tonight. So I think, you know, there's a vast representation interested in the theme, the topic that, you know, we're going to discuss tonight.
Sure.
So thank you for that intro. I did want to start off by first saying, you know, how were you selected for HTA when your name first came? Did somebody come and recruit you? How did that work?
You know, what happened was it was June 11, and Chris Tatum, the CEO at the time, announced that he was going to retire effective the end of August. And I read it, I heard it on the newscast, and my immediate response was I had 1 or 2 candidates in mind that I wanted to call and encourage that they go compete for this. And so I did that. You know, I contacted them, and because I live in Kona and my wife and I are quite happy in Kona. So the first thought was not, oh, great, I think I'll go apply. And so, but what happened was in the 5-6 days that followed, I started getting a number of phone calls from colleagues, elected officials, and a couple of board members on HTA, and basically saying, you know, would you consider becoming a candidate, you know, and just think about it. And if so, great. And if not, you know, if you can help us recruit candidates, that'd be great too. my wife and I kind of took about 4 days of just conversation because, and we started to sense that there was something different about this. And when I started to look at, getting beyond kind of the comforts of our own home and begin to understand the pain and suffering and the prolonged crises this would be. About 4 days into it, with my wife, I said, I'm going to apply. And so I called up the 2 guys who I talked to, right, who are younger, next generation types, right? And I said, I've decided to become a candidate, but I still want you guys to go after it, right? So, so you kind of submit your application, and this is really ridiculous. I had never done a resume in my life, right? And because I grew up in a Hawaii that was small enough, intimate enough, where uncle knew somebody that, right? And so this Wahine heard me tell my wife, I'll just slap one resume together. And this Wahine in her mid-30s who had a lot of experience in resumes said, you don't just slap a resume together. Send me the content and I'll format it, and then you can review the draft. And so you have to submit July 16. There were 324 candidates from all over the world. And it was an 8-week process. So every week you were getting interviewed by somebody or something. I mean, when I say something, like on computer, talking to you and videotaping you. So over the 8 weeks, they took it from 324 to 9 to 4 finalists, and then semifinalists, and then 2 finalists. And then in the end, I think they picked the oldest white-haired guy that was in there. So yeah, it was, and when you go through something like that, you learn a lot about yourself. I told my wife, look, if I'm going to apply and we're going to compete, we're going to win. We're not going, at this stage of my life, I don't need to place or moral victories. We're going after this. We got to go big. And so we made that commitment.
Wow. Well,
but what a process. I didn't realize there were so many applicants. That's kind of impressive.
Well, they posted on LinkedIn, right? And once you go to LinkedIn, and given the setback that the industry was already experiencing, you had all these executive class types, right? That would show interest. And I'm sure they came from all over the world. And I'm sure they had great resumes too. So yeah, it was a challenging process, but a good one and fair one.
Okay.
So that you get hired or you get appointed or hired in September, and the tourism industry is upside down, and you're expected now to participate in the rebuilding of tourism, and a lot of things have changed since September. A lot of things have changed, and the tourism industry is still fractured, still upside down, and what are your thoughts as far as from September to today? What is the biggest change, or what's the challenge right now?
Let me say that so I get selected in like the 3rd week of August, and I start 3 weeks later, right? And so knowing that I was going to step into this storm and chaos and upheaval and all the things that you're talking about that were present at that time. What was important for me was to take some time alone and get centered. And so when I came into HTA on September 16, I had embedded in my mind and in my heart that there needed to be an organizing principle, something that would guide me and my team and our work at HTA. And that organizing principle would come from a Hawaiian cultural value, which we all learn in our families. And that principle and value is malama, right? To care for and to protect, to nurture, especially important when we're dealing with a health crisis first and a financial collapse second, right? It's like, so that theme, and it became part of the interview process that led to the selection. And the mantra became Malama Ku'uhome, to care for my cherished home, right? And so for me, that became kind of a mantra and a personal commitment. But I also knew that during the time I was at HTA, part of the mission was to get everyone, each one of us on this webinar tonight, to start thinking about what it is that I gotta do to care for my cherished home, whether that home is Kauai, Waikiki, Texas, wherever. And so, once I establish that, then it becomes a guide, right? A guiding star. Now, since September 16, you have a number of things that we cannot control, right? Like the markets, like California, Japan, are experiencing severe COVID spikes, right? These are primary source markets where we derive high percentages of visitor arrivals. So for me, it also became part of being able to distinguish between what it is we can control and what it is we have no control over, right? And so, but within that Malama context, it was, and again, because of the pandemic, it was important that we individually start to Malama ourselves, Malama one another, that the recovery of our economy and the relaunch of tourism, the prerequisite was going to be to flatten the COVID curve permanently. That until we do that and can achieve that, and at some point vaccinations will help us with that. But until you've got that flattened, you cannot really reopen to scale. You can open a little bit, you can close. You can open for 5 weeks, and then you got to close, right? And so, as simple as it may sound, and as tired as people may be getting of hearing it, wearing a mask, washing your hands and personal hygiene and social distancing, those kind of things we can control. And so we got to do it, and we got to do it religiously to Malama ourselves, Malama one another. And then as we started to reopen the visitor industry, October 15, Trans-Pacific travel, our emphasis became on, okay, we got to now Malama the visitor, but we also have to educate the visitor on how to Malama us as a people, us as a place, us as a society, right? And that's not going to end. That's not a campaign. That's not let's try this. This is the way the new tourism model has got to be. People have just got to become more sensitive to one another, our neighbors, ourselves, our ohana, but also we have a responsibility to not only take care of the visitor, but we got to be able to educate the visitor on how to take care of us, so that there's this system of reciprocity that is part of this new tourism model that we're trying to evolve. Mm-hmm. But those are kind of the highlights for me of the first 4 months in office.
Well, let me ask you, John. I guess the first question of the evening, and thank you for that rollout, because it does make sense about coexisting, right? How can we do it in a safe way? Now, you did mention that there are some things you cannot control, like those destinations that's in the primary market for Hawaii, that they're now facing extreme spikes, and even the California market. As you have seen within the last couple, I guess, weeks, our lieutenant governor has made it, clear about what steps he wants to take. And you know, there are some that will disagree, and I'll be straight up. I disagree with what he's saying, and it's only because from a medical standpoint, um, you know, and I've been one of those that did take the vaccine shots, but you know, we know that there's um, not enough studies done to say whether or not you as a vaccinated person can stop the virus or can harbor the virus and pass it on to someone else who has not been vaccinated. So when the lieutenant governor talks about, you know, they're looking at if someone has already been vaccinated, hey, just let them come in. You know, it's that kind of stuff that I don't want to, well, to me, it's borderline irresponsible. I wish he didn't say that because you have those that's already in place who basically don't want to follow rules anyway, right? So you kind of like embolden them to think, hey, look what he just said. All right, right on. Then it makes it hard. You know, it makes it hard. Then we get these outbreaks occurring. From the HTA standpoint, what do you think is a safe way in opening back our tourism to those hot areas, as you may want to refer to it, that are experiencing problems of their own and trying to control the virus on their end coming into Hawaii? What do you think?
Yeah, you know, let me. I said this early on, and it means as much to me, if not more, today, right? And that is that the perfect scenario would be a fully vaccinated resident population and a fully vaccinated, you know, visitor arrivals, right? So because that would establish some sense of normalcy, and so that would be kind of the perfect way to relaunch, right? So short of that, everything less than that feels and seems imperfect, right? So we now have to work within that imperfection, right? And so what you just illustrated between you and Lieutenant Governor is kind of a symbolic of a built-in polarity that every community has, right? Which is this very pro-business side of the equation, and those who are not necessarily as business oriented that will tend to be more conservative in how we approach the recovery, right? Now, I will say this, that both sides of this polarity really want the best for Hawaii in general, but you still have this this ongoing debate, and I think that the science, clearly I cannot control what the Lieutenant Governor is saying. So, you know, but the science needs to guide us through this, right? And I credit Dr. Char, who's had the same start date as me at the DOH. You know, some of the front efforts on your island, I think with the hui of people, doctors and community citizens. I was just with Dr. Kapono Chong today, getting, you know, updating one another. And so, you know, the group on Kauai has really did some pioneering work early in the summer on this stuff that was science related, right? Mm-hmm. That I think has governed a lot of what steps and what decisions have been made at the mayor's office and at the county level. So, you know, each island going to approach it differently, and each island has its own character, its own quality. People in the visitor industry who at times, some of my colleagues who complain, you know, I'll say to them, when's the last time you asked how many hospital beds are available on your island? You in the visitor industry, you never ask that question. That's outside your bandwidth, my bandwidth. But there are people who do ask that question. They come from the Department of Health, right? They come from mayor's offices and that, right? So, you know, here's what I believe is that there are 5 CEOs in the state of Hawaii that are key: the governor and 4 mayors, right? And ultimately, they're the ones that got to make the CEO decisions. And no matter what decision they make on what island, it'll be controversial because of that polarity that's in there, right? From HTA standpoint, I believe that that it's the voices of the community that have to come forward, because when I look at 8,500 jobs lost on the island of Kauai, I understand that pain too. And I'll use an analogy, right? It's kind of like a commercial deep sea diver. You know, you're like several hundred feet deep, you're out of oxygen, and you got two choices. You can pass out on the floor of the ocean, or you can accelerate your ascent and get the bends. And we're kind of, you know, there are days that I feel like the decisions that we're making kind of come along those lines, that neither of them is really pretty and neither of them is really perfect, but one enables us to live another day, maybe. So these are tough issues, tough questions, but I'm a believer that the science has got to you know, to chalk the playing field, and we got to navigate our way using the best information we can possibly get.
Mm-hmm. Okay, thank you. Thank you.
Yeah.
Mel?
You know, it's difficult. I mean, even for Charlie and I, who we talk to a lot of people, hotel workers. We also talk to a lot of medical people throughout the state. But, you know, Kauai, we have 9 ICU beds, which really sets us apart from the other counties. But you know, it's proportionate, I guess. I mean, you know, you got 1 million people on Oahu versus 70,000 here. But I think the fear is that you cannot go out and establish more ICU beds. I know a lot of our viewers keep telling us, hey, what did the mayor do? How come he never create more ICU beds? Well, you know, the mayor could probably scrounge up 30 ICU beds, but who's going to man them? Who's gonna be the physicians and the nurses that care for these patients? So I think Kauai, you know, and I hate to, I am from Kauai, but I think we look at it a little differently because of the fear that you know, that beds are a rare asset for us, and we want to make sure that those are reserved for the local residents if needed. So I see the polarity. I really, and you know, the longer this thing goes, the farther apart the poles get, and it's difficult because when you listen to the science, when you listen to the science from CDC or from Dr. Fauci or from other doctors around the world, you hear one side, and then, you know, there's conflicting science talk, and that's what confuses people.
Yeah.
So HTA, as far as you take your guidance from the state, correct?
I do. You know, ultimately, on the top of my letterhead is Governor David Ige, right? And I do report to a 12-member board. And I'm an attached agency to DBED and direct. So, yeah, there's no shortage of people to report to, but ultimately it is a state. And so when the governor makes his proclamations and makes his decisions, I'm obligated to align HTA in accordance with that, right? And let's say I don't agree, right? I'm standing next to him at a press conference and there's a proclamation coming out, and let's say I don't necessarily agree. Well, the press conference isn't the place to say, you know, I disagree with the governor, right? What happens is I align accordingly. And then in between that proclamation and the next one is when the dialogue and the debate, you know, starts, because every one of these decisions is trying to find some level of balance between the polarity. And so, you know, it is, it's tough work. I will tell you, I'm on at least 2, sometimes 3 calls a week. They're recurring calls that are pre-scheduled. Governor, 4 mayors, attorney general, director of health, General Hara, the incident commander, and the operations teams for each, right? So it's a thorough kind of assessment of what's happening globally, nationally, locally, and then each island. And so you realize just that the first thing I realized is how caring all these leaders are. First of all, they care about their home. They care about Hawaii's people, right? But they also got tough jobs to be able to create policy that will help us kind of get through this, right? So it isn't easy. And then when I couple that with all of our stakeholders and partners in the visitor industry, right, who and local labor unions whose workers are on the bench and haven't been rehired yet, you really start to feel what a struggle it is to kind of make these pieces fit. And so I think that there's a couple of things going on. There's a vaccination plan that is underway. The governor has asked me to help lead in the creation of a plan for the visitor industry, that when it's determined that it's time for the industry workers, that a plan of implementation and distribution is in place. So the vaccinations rollout is key. More affordable testing is going to be key as well. And it's premature for me to talk much about it other than we are talking to companies that are pioneering the next generation of tests that are reliable, scalable, and affordable. And so if we can get it affordable and we can create more post-arrival tests and perhaps more frequency of post-arrival tests, these may all add the vaccination, more accessibility to tests, better tracing. We're going to need all those fibers to weave the solution over the next 6 to 12 months.
And I think that's my concern is that the vaccination, is going to be a while. Obviously, I mean, we know that we hear that more is coming, but we know that it's going to be a while before we completely vaccinate our population, much less the whole country. We also know that testing, that follow-up testing is crucial. That in fact, that secondary testing, post-arrival testing is crucial. And that's why Kauai tried to get that model approved where we would, force or mandate a 3-day quarantine and then a shot, and that was rejected. But so we know that's difficult as well here in Hawaii. And we know by the time we get the affordable testing and the newer testing, and before we get the vaccinations, it's going to be months. I would suspect probably within the next 6 months. And this is just from what I've read. But yet the state is looking at opening up travel, according to the press conferences, starting February with just the vaccinations, and then in a month later to Trans-Pacific, where as long as they have a second vaccine shot, then they don't need to test either pre-travel or post-travel. And I think that's concerning a lot of residents, that because we don't know enough, but yet some of these areas, and I know, and this is not to bash the Lieutenant Governor, this is the only information we get publicly from his interviews and the press conferences. He specifically said he wants to target California, Oregon, Washington, Texas, and New York. Those are some of the hottest spots in the country, but that's the target. Is that HCA's target, or is that just...
Okay? Let me say this at the moment. Okay, so HCA contracts marketing firms like the Hawaii Visitors and Conventions Bureau for the U.S. market, and then we have another company for tourism Japan, tourism Korea, right? Tourism South Malaysia. Oceania, all the different regions in the world, right? So right now, none of those regions are, do we have any marketing campaigns going, okay, because of the current condition. What we have are, we have branding campaigns to keep kind of Hawaii in front of that particular market. We have educational spots on what to do, but none of those regions are in a marketing mode, right? And it's something that we got to watch, and our contractors together with us, who are accountable to us, are watching like weekly and monthly. And then we got to factor in the CDC guidelines, right? And policies that come out, right? So and the reason, twofold, those particular markets are hot right now with COVID spikes, but also we need to be able to save some of our capital resources for further down the line when confidence returns to our communities, confidence returns to the travel market, that it's okay to travel, and then we can start rolling out, capital campaigns. At the moment, we've got it teed up. I want you guys to envision, let's say you got a marketing campaign of like about 4 months, right? Which includes launching it and implementing it. These plans are in place, but they kind of move along the timeline if conditions don't change. So right now, HVCB and Tourism Japan are teed up for marketing campaigns as early as May, the month of May. But if this time next month, things are worsened or haven't changed, that campaign just kind of moves down the line, because the point being, no use spending excessive funds in markets that are not ready to travel. And that's kind of an operating philosophy that we have. And we just got to pay attention to that, because those are the kinds of things we don't control. All we can control is when do we launch a campaign and when doesn't it make sense to be doing that. But at the same time, it's really important to keep the Hawaii brand, Maui brand, in front, so that there's enough national research right now. I just looked at a presentation today that shows that Hawaii is kind of top of the mind for people in the US in particular, people in Japan. That's important, but then you look at the next study, and the study talks about the fear of flying beyond 1,000 miles. The fear of catching the virus, the fear of being in crowd. You start looking at all of that, and you start to see that there's some built-in deterrents that are keeping the travel markets from just jumping at a trip to Hawaii. The other side of it is, if you know that most of you are going to, if an individual believes that they're going to get vaccinated in the next 3 to 4 months, then the prudent thing for them to do is to wait, get vaccinated before they travel. Now, the rest of the conditions under which we respond when they come here, 2 weeks ago, I asked that question to the director of DOH: can a fully vaccinated person carry the virus? Can a fully vaccinated person transmit the virus? And 2 weeks ago, the response was, the CDC hasn't concluded that yet, because it's too early in the vaccination process. So all of those factors will make a difference.
With regards to what you just said about the tourism and so many deterring factors right now, I think there is a cloud of uncertainty because of, use Kauai as an example, the hard stance that it took about, allowing people to come in without fully vetting them through a process to determine. And for for what we know, and I know you said you spoke to Dr. Capono Hansen because he knows about our plight when it comes to testing. The real numbers as far as travel-related infections, right? Travel-related. Kauai has been the most transparent out of all the counties exposing those numbers because we've been trying to align with the other counties to see how much have been coming in that had a pretest that was negative, and so many days after bingo, how much did they, turn positive? And so knowing that concept, what Kauai used to try to keep our numbers down, and it's proven. I mean, if we do the matchup, we can see basically the numbers are very, very low. Places like out in Haena, they, Chipper Wickman and his group, they really did a push to say, hey, at one time, Haena, Hanalei was a tourist mecca. Plenty of people go down there. But they said, hey, if we're going to enjoy this for years to come, we got to do it differently because we cannot overrun it. Is the HTA looking at tourism differently? I said this before. What we're facing now is sort of like a reset button because everything is down, right? We've always had banner years, hundreds of thousands, of tourists. Yay, everybody happy, economy boom. With all the tourist dollars, but yet, is there a look and see attitude as far as, hey, maybe we got to do things a little bit different, so there can be a coexistence between the industry and the people who call Hawaii their home, because during this time we saw a lot of just from our show we see a lot of negative comments about anti-tourism. Well, I shouldn't say anti-tourism, just they're upset. They wanted to be like more controlled. And I think one of the templates were what Chipper Wickman and his group did down in Hanalei, is to control, really control how many visitors can go in so they can enjoy the beaches. And before they let any more in, so many got to leave and back and forth. So they made it very, very controlled so the natural environment doesn't get overrun. Is the HTA looking at something like that on, I guess, resetting how tourism is handled now when it opens?
The answer is yes. And first of all, let me say aloha to Chipper and Haole, because they, going back several years, first of all, their life's work has been testimony to what you just talked about. Right. Separate from that, they were responsible for, in 2016, for bringing the World Conservation Congress to Honolulu, the state of Hawaii. So you had, 10,000 delegates from 100 plus countries, right? And the topic being conservation, sustainability, and what it entails. So in answer to your question, though, a year ago, the HTA board, after 1 year of going into the communities, drafted, and later, a year ago, adopted a new strategic plan for 2020 to 2025. And that strategic plan has 4 pillars in it: natural resources, Hawaiian culture, community, and then branding, right? And so I had, little to do with that. I was part of a team that reviewed the drafts, 15 months ago, but I certainly didn't approve it. But they did, and what made me optimistic and hopeful a year ago was that strategic plan. I thought was an example of the industry recognizing that it needed to focus more on managing tourism as opposed to just marketing it, right? And so in many respects, I thought, gee, this is great. This is like the industry kind of catching itself, right? And so, and embedded in that strategic plan, there's a whole bunch of objectives. It's online on the HTA website. I would encourage our our listeners tonight to visit it, but in it is embedded the Aloha Plus Challenge, which identifies 6 goals in sustainability for the state of Hawaii to achieve by the year 2030. And this was signed back in 2016 when Mayor Carvalho was in office. So I recognized it when they signed it. This was like 2 months after Hokulea left on the world voyage. The 4 mayors, the governor at the time, and OHA CEO signed it, right? Put this in motion. What always bothered me was I didn't know how the state of Hawaii could possibly achieve these goals in sustainability unless the largest industry in the state was a leader in that effort. Okay? And so in answer to your question, part of an outgrowth of the strategic plan is a process called the Destination Management Action Plan. It originated, HTA was a convener. It originated from a steering committee of, I believe, 22 people from diverse parts of your community to come together, establish, identify certain priorities that they could then take out to the community at large. I remember a couple months ago attending 2 of the Kauai meetings, each of them with 200 people. Granted, virtual gatherings are not perfect community engagement vehicles, but it's all we have right now. I've looked at the draft of the Kauai plan, which is going to be published very shortly. Our board has approved it. It really co-authored by a whole range of people on Kauai. My direction to the HTA staff is, this is not an HTA plan. The plan's gotta belong to Kauai. The plan's gotta belong to Maui, right? Now, they're not silver bullets, and they're not, they don't answer every question, but I think that they identify some of the common themes that will enable Kauai, with HTA support and public policy support, to move Kauai toward what we now call a regenerative tourism model. A regenerative tourism model is for all of us to stop and say, answer one question. In 2 to 3 years, do we want the natural resource base of Kauai to be in better condition in 2 to 3 generations than it is today? And the answer is yes. And that's important because the generations then need that natural resource base to begin to develop any quality of life for themselves, right? But if that's the vision we hold, and we reverse engineer it into the present, what steps do we need to take in our lives each day to move it toward that vision? And so I'm encouraged by it's called the DMAPS process. Visitor industry folks, community folks, folks in agriculture, and other sectors were involved in it. I got to meet, on 2 occasions with the steering committee. And frankly, I thought, when you see the end product, I think you'll be hopeful as well.
Charlie talked about chipper guys out on the North Shore, how they really redefined that Limahuli area, Ha'ena, Ke'e, and they, ultimately restricted the number of visitors per day. They restricted the number of parking lots. It really allowed nature to regenerate. It really allowed the beaches and the coral and everything out there to just, it was an amazing process. Do you see tourism going forward? I remember hearing you speak. I can't remember where it was. It was on the news, and you talked about managing versus marketing, and I thought that was probably one of the best things I've ever heard coming out of HTA. No disrespect to your predecessors, but because of the pandemic, we got to think differently. But going forward now, as HTA moves forward, once we get beyond the pandemic, do you see Hawaii with, and let's even go further down to Kauai, Maui, Molokai, and the different islands. with less tourists coming in that are able to have a much better experience, that also doesn't compromise qualities of life for the residents of these islands, or to continue on marketing full throttle and expecting the counties or the states to catch up to the demand and the maintenance. Because I think for Kauai anyway, we get more people come in daily now with flights. And I mentioned before you came on, I was talking to our viewers that we don't have a say. The public doesn't have a say in airline routes. Airlines, they go lobby the feds and the state, and they get a new direct flight from California, San Francisco, wherever. The public never gets to have any say in that. And what we end up with are a lot of people coming in, more than our island can handle, both environmentally and just as a quality of life issue. So where do you see HDA going down? Is we looking at a more smaller group, but with a better experience, or not?
You know, well, part of the management of it, I don't think it's just pure numbers, right? I think what when I look at the work that you're referring to, the Chipper and them did on that side of the island, you know, it essentially is the 21st century version of the kapu system, right? Is that and the kapu system, as was taught in my family, had nothing to do with depriving humans. It had everything to do with recognizing that other species of life needed time and space to reproduce and regenerate, right? So I think that if you carry that perspective in all of the hot spots that you may have on Kauai, where there's overcrowding, right? And we carry that same kind of mentality, and that really goes back to what I was saying earlier about Malama Ku'uhome, right? If we apply that thought, that again, 3 generations from now, the natural resources have to be in better shape, then I think, I don't see the answer being in a numeric equation yet, as much as I do in how we manage these areas to then determine what the actual capacity will be, right? Because in an urban setting, you can still practice the kapu system, but those qualities and those conditions under which we would operate would be very different. So at the moment, I'm reluctant to just talk about numbers, because my concern in my position, if I say to people, you know, we had 10 million for 400,000 in 2019. But we just want to do 6 million. Then my concern is that what we're really going to do is we're going to do things the same. We're just going to do less of it, right? When in fact, what the pandemic affords us is an opportunity to innovate, to come up with new systems of how you manage people moving around the island. Kauai in 5 years, if you had a public transportation system, for instance, that caused rent-a-car companies to rethink the number of vehicles they really need, because part of our management system was a public transportation system, then we would begin to understand what those capacities would mean. But that's my reluctance right now to just go, we did 10 million for, gee, life would be so much better at 6. Because at 10 million for, there was a 2.08 billion state tax revenue achieved, right? And so that's kind of an important number to understand, because once we start dialing it down in visitor numbers, then in some way we got to make up those revenue streams. And so I'm actually hoping that the industry, tourism, can actually become the driver of diversification as opposed to the antithesis of it, because take for instance what happened in the culinary arts and how it affected cottage farming. When a group of chefs 25 years ago statewide said, We're going to help plant. We're going to buy local. We're going to make a commitment to our fishermen and frankly, developed a whole new genre of a culinary within the culinary field of Pacific Rim and Hawaii Pacific cuisine and all that stuff. That's an excellent model. It's something that we got to be paying more attention to have the largest industries start to drive that kind of diversification that has a ripple effect, a positive one in ranching, in farming, and fishing, right? So that's kind of where I'm at right now. But clearly what we need to do is learn how to live inside the boundaries of our natural resource base.
This last question that I have is, and this goes towards, again, everything you talked about, the polarity. We have one side, administration, and the responsibilities they have in basically running our society and keeping everything viable, right? And then you have the people, which is basically the engine block itself. That's got to be maintained. So everything has to work in some way, shape, or form, some type of harmony. I always look at some of the questions posed by some of our viewers, and a lot of it is it's targeted towards the traveler and they themselves not being safe. They come over here. We talk about the masking mandate that was put into place. There was a big hoopla with former Mayor Caldwell, about the 6-foot rule. So people say, well, if I'm not within a 6-foot rule, I don't need to use the mask only until I get into 6 feet. So he said, why even make up that rule if it's going to be broken anyway? So I guess my question to you, John, is for the sense of security for the people of Hawaii, do you think that the airline should be doing a little bit more in maybe getting the traveler, say, they're coming here, maybe, I don't know if it's something that it has to be done on a federal level, but, screening them to the point where making sure that they're safe to even get on the plane to come over here?
That would be ideal. And I've been involved in conversations about it. And typically the conversation goes like this, that an airline feels that they don't have the right to make inquiries about people's medical conditions, right? And I can understand that there might be kind of laws or protections that do that. At the same time, I understand we're in an emergency, we're in a crisis, right? We're not operating, normally. And so, generally I will say this, when you're in a crisis, when you're in a battle, we have to be prepared to give up some of our personal freedoms, right? For the greater good, right? And so that's my personal feeling about it. But I've heard this about the airlines. I also understand that if they fly to 100 destinations and every destination get its own safe travels plan, that is problematic as well. But this whole issue about whether they should be allowed to board without a negative test, right, I've heard that debated. And then you get into the whole equation about whether or not there's a service delivery system with test partners that can actually pull that off. But that debate goes on. And the simple answer to your question is yes, I would love to see the airlines do it all. I would love to see everybody along the sequence of service in the visitor's experience to do more, and whether it's Uber, ground transportation, every link, right? And that just requires, a lot of work and coordination. And in that area, we've got a long way to go. And frankly, can we get there is still a question, right? Because it is, massive, but this pandemic is an innovations accelerator. So anything that we believe, and that innovation can come in the form of what went on at Hyena. That's a very innovative solution, right? So when I talk about innovation, I'm not talking about high tech. I'm talking about returning to ancestral wisdom, to indigenous knowledge, to modern science, modern technology, woven together to get us out of this mess.
Well, you know, I will close my segment. I'll turn it over to Mel. when this all started, we said, gee, how simple, and because there was this big debate about quarantine, right? I said, gee, I know if I like bring my dog from California, I got to put him in quarantine for so many days. And that's where everything started. I said, hey, you got to quarantine a dog. Why not quarantine humans? Oh, but humans different. I said, yeah, but sometimes humans live a bit more peel out than a dog because they're going to do things they're not supposed to do. And the next thing you know, everything starts spreading from there. So anyway, I just wanted to throw that out there. Brother Mel?
Yeah, I think the education of the visitor, I think, is crucial. I think I'm not sure how you get that done. I know that we hear a lot, we see a lot on our show comments, and we see it on Facebook where a lot of our visitors pretty much disregard the masking and the social distancing. A lot of locals too. Don't get me wrong, because our locals need to be educated too. These Facebook posts about locals getting together, hugging, and drive me nuts, but they know better. I'm just wondering, are our tourists being educated prior to coming, or from the travel agent to wherever that process, from wherever they're from to when they get here, are they being educated and informed of what can be expected or what is required of them when they land? And I think that,
Mel, and a good question. In answer to that, there's several places, like when they make a hotel reservation, when they make an airline reservation, when there's the ability to establish a communications link with them digitally. The Bureau has a whole sequence of messaging and programs that go out. The business we're in is nothing short of modifying human behavior, right? And you and I know what a challenge that is. I don't care if it's a 10-year-old, it's even more difficult for a guy who's 69 like me. So that's what we're dealing with, but we cannot let up. I mean, the point is we don't have a choice but to sustain that kind of educational message and try and get others, because part of that is peer-to-peer enforcement as well. Getting people, when you walk by somebody with a man who's not masking, politely say, which is one of the reasons why in one of the press conferences, I wanted to clarify with the governor that when you, in an emergency proclamation, when you say wear a mask, does it carry the weight of law? And he said, yes, right? So I said, well, then I got up in front of the cameras, and I think some people were stunned because I said, look, in the state of Hawaii, we're not asking you to wear a mask, we're ordering you to wear a mask, right? And that edge has got to come into our vocabulary, because this idea of Hawaii being very relaxed and all of that, if it starts to translate into confusion in our messaging, where, in Hawaii, everybody's just laid back and taking it easy. The fact is there's certain things we're not taking easy. And I'm one pressing for stronger language on mask wearing, on social distancing and all of that, because, we're dealing with the challenge of changing human behavior.
I think enforcement is the key,
Enforcement, yeah.
Enforcement. I mean, if I was the state or the county law enforcement, I'd go through Facebook, and when you see the picture of the recent event and all the people taking that group shot, the selfies, cite them all.
Good idea.
You got the proof, cite them.
Yeah.
Go ahead and say, hey, thank you for sharing your wonderful moment with your friends. Here's your ticket. Go explain to the judge why you wasn't wearing a mask and why you weren't social distancing. Because a lot of and I'm sorry, because we said 3 minutes after, but I got to get this in, because even now I see a lot of comments about the visitor. But we as locals, we travel too. And we're having a lot, if you look at Kauai's cases, majority of our cases are travel related, but the majority of our travel related cases are from residents. So, you know,
Yeah.
while we can do better with our visitors, we can sure do better with our residents. So let's go, people. Let's do what's right.
You know, my grandmother used to tell us from the times, clean your own house first.
Yeah.
You're not here to tell others how to clean their house. Clean your own house first. And that's a lesson we got to take, you know, seriously, because that's part of the recovery going to be incumbent on that as well. And hopefully we can set the standard so that when the visitor does come and understands that we take this kind of stuff seriously and that our behavior should be modeled by them. Then we know we're making ground on it, but we got to clean our own house first.
Like you said early on, we take care of what we can control.
Yeah.
But likewise, you know, we really we wanna, you know, there's some people that don't want any tourism, think we can succeed without it. I told them before you came on, I said they were dreaming. But at the same token, we don't want to, you know, have tourism take up such a footprint on our islands that our quality of life for our residents are compromised. That's I think that's the balance that we got to find, that both can coexist in a healthy and safe manner. And I think that's kind of the direction.
Well said. That's well said. Hey guys, I appreciated this a lot. So thank you.
Well, after we go off the air, all the politicians gonna come watch. So they're gonna watch them. I'm telling you, that's what happens every night. They don't come live, but they're gonna come on after we go off, and it's so fun. So don't get surprised you get called into the governor's office tomorrow. Charles, any closing thoughts?
What is that?
Any closing comments?
Well, I like to say to our guest tonight, thank you so much, John, for joining us. It was a long-awaited journey to get you on. And to our viewers out there, I'd like to say thank you for many compliments. You know, when you're listening to someone of this nature, we really wanted you to get an insight into the operation of what is being thought out. And I know some people, you might get a little upset that, you know, this is all talk, but you know what? Everything starts with dialogue, and it starts from somewhere. That's the building blocks. You just don't go from being born and start running into a marathon. You know, there's years before you get to the point of running a marathon. So to our viewers out there, I thank you very, very, very much, because, you know, one thing that came across, we got someone with local values, and he shared it with us. It was heartwarming for me. And you know, it kind of brings in light, listening to John. And then last night we had the bad news of our passing of Mayor Billy Kinoy. And yet I can hear Billy and I listen to John, and it's just like, hey, they're here. So we don't need to worry too much.
Hey, Charlie, let me add to that, right? Billy was one of my references in the HCEO competition. Mm-hmm. And you know, I lost a dear brother in him. But let me tell you that one of the last conversations we had, and I'll share this with your audience, is I understand that there's resentment toward tourism for some, and an anti-tourism. But let me say this. We don't have the luxury of being anti-anything, okay? So if you believe the future is in another sector, I encourage you to go create it or help cultivate that growth, whether it's in agriculture, whether it's in, you know, the oceans, wherever it is. We'll find that passion. Don't waste your life and time being anti-tourism. And then once you get it going, come see us to see how we can collaborate on this. If you think it's in technology, go for it, okay? But we don't have the luxury to be anti-anything right now. And Billy and I spend a lot of time talking about that. And I'm saddened by his passing, and I'm inspired by the way he lived his life. And he'll never be separated from me and my thoughts.
Well, you know, what he did is he showed us all, you know, his mantra was, no can, you know,
Yeah.
everything is possible. So, and again, I just would like to thank you. I thank you, audience, for joining us tonight. I think this was a well worth segment. And like I said, it's been a while since we had, many of you have asked for John to come on, and we did so tonight. So thank you. Mel?
Thank you, Charlie. Thank you, John. I appreciate it. You know, what we wanted to do was put a face to the name, what we try to do on our show is get our viewers connected with our guests, because, you know, we get to see you 1 minute, 2 minute. You may have done a 15-minute speech. They'll take a 10-second segment, put them on the news, and everybody takes it out of context, and then you become public enemy number one. We wanted the people to get to know you like we all just did, and understand that this is, you know, we undervalue the value of having someone that's connected to the culture like yourself, and can apply those characteristics to the plan. You know, your destination management action plan, again, available on the website at HDA. Go check it out, guys. Go read them. Check it out. Yep. And those are the kinds of things that you mentioned, Billy. God, yeah, I lost a good friend and a brother, man, and I wish he was here. You know, we had actually asked him to come on the show. He couldn't do it, but I feel the same presence, like Charlie said. It's like the same connection. We appreciate you so much. We pray for you through your the upcoming months. Is going to be tough, but we appreciate you so much, my friend.
All right, aloha Kauai.
Okay, tomorrow night, guys, we got Senate President Kochi will be on. Friday, we got Feel Good Friday. Next week, Tuesday, Les Kondo from the county, the state auditor's office will be on next Tuesday. That'll be interesting. All right, guys, take care. God bless. We love you guys. Stay safe.
Aloha.
Aloha. Here we go. Get my right button. Okay, here we go. Aloha.